Welcome back, Indy NXT Debrief. It's me and Archie reflect on Indy NXT's first oval race of the year at Worldwide Technology Raceways. We reflect on Myles Rowe going from last to first in one of the most chaotic races we've had so far this season.
And you will have the pleasure of hearing from Myles Rowe for the second episode in succession with more phenomenal insights as he breaks down this record-breaking drive. And Josh Pierson joins us for Andretti, his first time on the show after his first podium for the team and first of the year.
I've got to say, this is one of the most insightful episodes we've had thus far on Indy NXT Debrief. Both Josh and Myles are really good at kind of breaking down how it's like to drive on the ovals and the specifics of being a racing driver in Indy NXT. It's going to be really awesome listening, but let's start off with the guy who went from last to first. Here's Myles Rowe reflecting on his victory at Gateway. So for the second week in a row, we're joined by Myles Rowe on the back of his victory at Worldwide Technology Raceway. Myles, it's been a bit of a crazy week for you after your victory. So kind of how has it felt just to be in the spotlight for 1 week, be a bit of the centre of attention, and just especially after that performance?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been really good. Speed on Fox had me featured driver of the week, which was, I think that was the highlight, no doubt. Being against, heavyweights like Antonelli, Marquez, and Hamlin is something, that, will really put a smile on your face. And so, yeah, I was just glad, honestly, to bring that success to Abel, after, the start of the season we've had, and, being back in the championship fight, being back in the top five, and having this momentum going into the middle part of the season is huge for us. So it's been good.
And obviously, I guess we're best starting off at where the weekend kind of started in terms of qualifying. So if you could just explain to people who might not have heard what happened to you in qualifying, what actually happened, what was the cause of obviously running that extra lap, just speak us through it.
Yeah, so in open wheel racing, or just in general, it's hard to see the checkered flags, especially in the ovals, because they're so high. So you go off your radio calls. So you go green, white, checkered. But also we've been having radio issues all year. We've had to change our radio many times. So even when I'm hearing green, white, it's a little bit blurred and you can't actually make out a lot of things that you're hearing. I knew it was the last lap, kind of in oval racing, kind of blend in towards the inside wall as you're going down the straightaway. Did, the full blend to the inside, lifted off the throttle, but didn't hear anything on the radio. There was absolutely no call, no checker, nothing. So then I pinned it because obviously I have time to go around turns 1 and 2. They'll call checker, they'll call pit in, I lift, and, I'll be able to go through pit lane. But the whole time it was just radio silence. And then by the time I came out of 1 and 2, I'm like, man, did I miscount or something? And there was no call going down the back straight. So I just, made the decision to basically stay out instead of going in, just split second decision. And then, so just took the third lap. And obviously that was the DQ for that. We did the radio, and we switched the radio for the race. Radio was way better. But just, communication error, I think just made things a little bit confusing out there, but no doubt my fault. Should have listened to my gut and just pulled in like I knew it was. But yeah, just radio communication.
And after something like that, which is just a bit unfortunate in many ways, kind of what your immediate emotions? Is it like a bit of frustration? Is it you should turn that into positive? Kind of how do you immediately reflect after an incident like that?
Yeah, it's no doubt a disappointment because that was our pole lap. Should have been starting the race in first position. So having to know that you're supposed to be starting up front and go all the way to the bottom of what is a very large field, 23 other opponents in the field. It's no doubt it's a blow to the day, especially after being P2 in practice. So you really had to have a lot of mental fortitude to kind of get through, the hours after. Obviously the team, they were disappointed as well. We were very much capable of starting up front. But their reaction was, and their reaction was so positive, and the way that they turned it around and all of a sudden had all this confidence that I was going to be able to change the script tomorrow in the race and be able to race my way to the front. There was actually no negativity, no negative reactions from my mechanics on, my other teammates' cars, team owner and everything. It was all positivity. And so that really showed a lot of character, I think, from all of us, me as a driver, just how I took it personally, the team, and how, we all reacted together with it. We reacted as a team, and we took that together. And so that was kind of the thing I think that made, Sunday possible. And just because we were all in it together regardless. And that, made honestly the whole experience just very, very rewarding in the end.
And obviously, kind of looking at Sunday, I remember you saying in the press conference you'd kind of pictured in your head what might happen, and you'd almost done some sketching as well. So, what did you kind of picture? How did some of that sketching and all of that help? Just talk us through kind of how you reset in terms of your approach for the race.
Yeah, so naturally, after coming out of practice and going into qualifying, the whole picture of the weekend was starting from, top positions. After obviously you had to make a very quick reset and what that picture of your race looked like. And so there was to do what happened, which we saw, you were going to have to make the high line work, right? And it was one thing to make it work in 3-4, but 1-2, especially what I found in practice, just presently at that time, was very difficult to kind of keep the car up high in a certain way to where you can basically get the passes rolling, going into 3 and going back into turn 1. Turn 3 and 4 is flat out for us. So really it's about how you take 1 and 2 behind traffic. That really sets up the rest of the course to then, apply a pass coming back across the finish line into turn 1 again. And like I said, in practice that day, I didn't see anybody making that work really. Kind of the idea is losing as little position as you can coming out of turn 2 behind traffic. And it was excessively hard to basically not lose more than 3 or 4 car lengths coming out of turn 2. There was an idea of a line you could take, a higher line, but it was something that none of us were doing. So the morning of on Sunday, I knew I wasn't just gonna be able to go into the race and just, wing it and be like, I'll figure it out. So I really just, put my head to it. I had one of my close friends on the team, Kevin, who's our DAG, one of our DAGs, and I had him print out 2 track maps because I wanted to try 2 different lines, just sketching and seeing it. So I drew the normal racing line, or whatever my idea of that was. And then I drew 2 different lines for how I think I would approach it in traffic, and just the physical act of doing that and seeing that visually instead of just winging it and thinking this is what I'll try to figure out, in the car, allowed me to kind of open my head to a different possibility of how to basically control the steering arc, if we get technical into it, how to control the steering arc getting into 1, and then basically manipulate it in the sequence between 1 and 2 in order to stick to that higher line that would then open up the passes around the track. And that was the key that really basically did everything for that race, and it worked.
And obviously you guys practice and qualify before IndyCar do their highline practice. So when you go into a race, do you just kind of assume the IndyCars have worked at the highline enough where you can race on it? Is it kind of a bit of a guesswork in the opening laps? Kind of how does that practice session affect you guys?
Yeah, it's you're kind of guessing at it for the most part. I mean, we look at the broadcast and footage and see kind of where they're at. But it really depends on, how your setup is, because sometimes the highline works for people, but if it is working in a session, sometimes it might not be for you because of your setup, and vice versa, right? So it's really, seat of the pants feel, and just, depending on the conditions, wind and everything can change. Someone can crash, and they might bring the sweepers out, or they might, lay something on the track that might change, the whole story of it all. So it's really a seat of the pants, kind of in the moment feel, that you have to work with.
And obviously you kind of did a lot of kind of revised planning overnight to come into the race. So how do you kind of balance obviously planning meticulously like that, but almost not overthinking the race? Just talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I can't say I didn't overthink it. From, when the DQ happened all the way until really in the car, there's different scenarios running through my head constantly. And this happens honestly in any given situation, any race weekend. But naturally it was, the frequency of what I was thinking could happen was, there was a lot more things that it's just naturally from being in that position and knowing how drastic the change could be, whether it was a successful change or equally negative change, right? And so really I do have this system of just obviously kind of manifesting, your own success, and seeing that through in your imagination, in your mind. And so I just always try to channel the right positive kind of manifestation in my imagination. Even if it was some overthinking, and just, maybe I thought about it too much. At least it's, trying to, like I said, manifest the positive out of it. And that was the key, just you got to stick to the positive script. And that'll enable, just the likelihood of that happening being better.
And coming into the race, did you kind of have like an expectation of, okay, this would be a really good day, this is where we want to be, or was it a case of you're just going to see how you feel as you get on?
Yeah, so in my head then I don't want to sound cocky, but I did know that first place. Like I remember telling my dad before I even left to go to the hotel that night that, I was going to still win the race. It did not matter what position I started in. I was still going to finish in that position. Yeah, so that was just kind of like my mindset and my whole honest thought process and kind of my system for enabling that. Because naturally it's going to be more difficult if, that's not your natural thought process. So that was kind of the whole idea of it.
And then kind of when you are racing, like ultimately you're doing very long stints, longer than IndyCar stints. So kind of how would you balance that kind of tire saving, no, you have to get through the field, but also having the aggressive enough to make the moves when you need to?
That's a good question, man. And honestly, we all have so much learning to do as we constantly go throughout the years. And that, in my notes was one of like the biggest weaknesses, I think, in that race. Because it's not that I wore out my tires too much. It was the opposite. I saved so much of my tires. I mean, I think I had enough, for another 25 laps and still be good. I was very, very cautious of the right rear the whole weekend. In practice, I did one of my longest, written debriefs ever, just trying to, make sure that, Kent Boyer, my engineer, we had a fast car, but making sure that our right rear was going to be preserved in order to run the high line accordingly. Because if it was not, we would not be able to basically defend properly, go through traffic properly at the end of the race, regardless whether we were in clean air or not. And so when I got into P3, I think it was around lap 40, I really started to protect the right rear. Just waiting for the 26 and the 29 of Hughes and Pierson to kind of eat up their rubber as they were, kind of very close to each other. But when I got past them in clean air, I stood and I didn't. And then obviously there's a few cautions after that, but I protected it so much that, I didn't, I set the fast lap on the last lap of the race. That should have happened maybe 10 laps earlier, if I'm going to be honest. But it was because of just how cautious I was of that, because it really would make a race difference. You never know when a restart is going to happen and things. Obviously, at the last 10 laps, last 8 laps or so, probably safe to like push at that point. And I knew I had a good bit of tire left, but obviously, I was just in management of the race as well. So there wasn't really any need to put any risk there. But I definitely could have actually attacked in my perspective and for what I was doing, I could have and should have attacked more just a little bit earlier.
And I think I've read on your Instagram, actually, in the caption saying you've kind of watched some of the IndyCar greats on ovals. So I'm kind of just intrigued how that's helped you, and ultimately, how do you manage to translate that to your own skill set?
Yeah, I did a lot of like old footage for this race, and I do that for a good few races, mainly for like the ovals, right? Because there's a lot of history there, and there's just a lot of experience with those guys, especially with the equipment they were running, right? And just like honestly the safety factor too, even, that can influence how you drive as well. And so just like running through like the races in 99 and 2000 at St. Louis, and just kind of seeing how they would take to the high line, and just like the risk that they would put themselves in, that was something that helped me be able to channel the right kind of aggressive yet calculative mindset needed for that race.
And then obviously you mentioned you had the cautions late on, so what was your mindset in those situations? Because I guess you were probably wanting to try and pull away from the field, and then you kind of got pegged back. So in those situations, just how were you approaching that?
Yeah, honestly, for how this year has been going, I mean, we know my junior Formula career, typically I'm up front, but obviously in Indy NXT, the program has been tough, especially on road and street. And I was just, super happy to be back in that, position, that this defensive position. So I was honestly just like, especially after leading a few laps, after starting from the back, I was just like pumped, like, let's go. Finally, starting the restart up front, like I was all in for it, just ready to defend and like, establish my position up front, right? So I was just very happy to be there when those cautions came because obviously, like we said, I protected the equipment and I protected the tires as well. So I had the confidence that everything was going to be good, and I just established more dominance through that.
We knew you believed that the victory would happen. You've got victories before, but kind of how did this compare to the victories you got? What kind of were the emotions when you crossed the line, given the accomplishment you had done, the lowest winning position in Indy NXT ever? Just tell us a little bit about what you were feeling once you left the car.
Yeah, it was quite. I mean, that last 24 hours was quite mentally hectic for me, right? So, honestly, I can't say it was relief or joy. I was just like very calm, right? Because I really did truly believe I was going to win that race, even after the qualifying. And I think I was just like very much so after it, like in my moment. It's also, like we said, like road industry has been a struggle this year with the program with Abel and just being, where I belong, on the top spot. Again, regardless of the positions gained and everything, it was just a good sense of calm of, just feeling like at home, right? When you get home, you're not very excited. You're not there's no emotions, right? You're just there and happy to be there and just going with the flow. So and that's how I felt then.
And obviously, people have spoken a lot about the fact it was a record-breaking drive, it was a historic drive, and all those types of words. So, what is your relationship with kind of records? Is that something that matters to you, or kind of what else maybe motivates you?
Yeah, no, it's huge, for me. I think for any athlete, I think, to speak for me, and I believe a lot of athletes feel this way. You try honestly not to think about it too much, and just let them, acclimate. But they definitely are something that are extremely special, and something that define your career and define who you are to a certain extent, because it's accumulation of all the hard work you put in the time that you have here on this earth, right? And so yeah, it's just try not to get over, but in the moments, in when the career is still active, try not to get overly attentive to it because there's more and more and more to do constantly, right? And we're always focused forward, just like you're always focused on the next corner. And that, previous corner, we can analyze it in things, but the throttle's already pinned down and we're headed to the next thing. And I think that's my relationship with it.
Interesting. And obviously, I think you mentioned it in the press conference as well, kind of how this is the sort of performance that can put the wider paddock a bit on notice. So in terms of reflecting back on a performance like this, how important do you see making this sort of statement as in terms of going forward years to come for your future?
Yeah, it's like I said, everything I knew I can do. I think like you said, like it definitely is a certain result that the other people in the paddock cannot deny. There's performance here, and I think looking back, it'll be something I'm just very grateful for. Something I'm very happy that I was able to do. Just I think we all agree is a very just beautiful race. It's a beautiful thing to watch, and yeah, just to have the paddock feel that way, entirely is something that I feel like maybe not everyone gets, and like I said, very grateful for it.
I've seen a lot of lobbying on social media, in particular from Will Buxton, saying that you should be at the Indy 500 next year. Obviously, that is kind of everybody's dream. Is that something that you're already now targeting a little bit? When you're gonna start putting the work in towards kind of trying to get something like that sorted?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's all I focus on every day, right? It's about the 500 campaign. There's a couple different things, people and things I'm doing, like just outreach is a big thing for me right now. I'm also a founder. I'm an entrepreneur. I have this company, and trying to use that as leverage to get to the 500 because it's a tech company that has a lot of relation to competition. I wouldn't say motorsport, but it's a company that basically emphasizes competitive infrastructure, and so kind of using that as like an extra piece of leverage and extra asset that goes along with just, being skilled in motorsport and being, breaking records in motorsport. So yeah, every single, besides like, the natural sim work and fitness, like my whole mindset right now is just on outreach, and because that's what I need. I need funding to get there and stay there, so that's what I'm working on every day.
And we spoke last week about how that second place in Detroit could really be a momentum builder for the rest of your season. You follow it up with the victory at Gateway. So kind of just what springboard does this give you for the rest of the year? You said at the start, maybe you're kind of back in the championship picture now. So kind of how do you assess where you are and currently, and kind of what's the outlook for the rest of the season from this point?
Yeah, it's definitely great to have a good race like this, but we have to, and even Detroit, but we still don't come out the box strong on road and street. It's nice to be, have that, authority almost, you could say, as being P1 on team and everything, but it's not enough, for the championship, right? Like we need to come out the box really, really strong, or a lot stronger on these road and street courses if we really want to have a chance. We're working on that day and night. I think why the Detroit race was successful is because I think we found something overnight, with something in the system with the car that we've been trying to fix for a long time, and hoping to see that translate in Road America, especially in the first couple of practice sessions, to be set up right for qualifying, because that's really, where we're losing it. It's not coming out the box strong, being behind that 8 ball, and then qualifying, not being in the right starting positions. So that's really all I'm focused on. Obviously, we have the skill in the ovals. We have the technique on road and street in terms of driving skill. I think with all the team members, it's just about getting everything cohesive and not having these hiccups and things like that at the start of the weekend, in order for us to start up front a lot better, so that we have those points be a lot more of a chance.
Just to end off, it feels like we've got a very rare off week in IndyCar/Indy NXT at the minute. A lot going on. World Cup, NBA Finals, got Le Mans. What's kind of your plans for this week? What are you going to be up to?
Yeah, man, I'm all Knicks right now, man.
Yeah, there's another one of us.
I can't get over it. I'm such a Knicks fan right now. I mean, I never really watch. I mean, I don't really watch too much sports, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, besides like just different forms of motorsport, because anytime I can watch a sport, I try to watch a different form of motorsport to study the craft, right, and increase my knowledge. But right now, I have been watching so many, basketball games, the finals games, and just like supporting the Knicks. I've been out in the city with, my roommate and my friends, watching them and supporting them, and that's been unreal. Just like being able to see that energy in downtown Manhattan and everything has been like really cool for me. So that's what I'm focused on right now. Yeah.
Awesome, Myles. Congratulations once again. An epic performance, as I'm sure you've been told many a time. Hopefully, as you said last week, we'll see plenty of time. But I think to end off, we must say, go Knicks. Let's get it done tomorrow.
Go Knicks, yes.
So that was Myles, and I'm sure you'll all agree that was pretty phenomenal. We appreciate him joining us while in transit, but we will now move on to our next guest, who is equally insightful. So here is, for the first time on the show, Josh Pierson.
So we're joined by Josh Pierson of Andretti Global after his first podium of the year at Worldwide Technology Raceway. It's been a couple of days, Josh. So what have you got up to since Gateway, kind of as we go into the kind of the busy period of the calendar at this point?
Yeah, it has been picking up, hasn't it? But I've just been really relaxing after Gateway. Obviously starting some prep for Road America that's coming up here, but otherwise just getting back into the swing of things back home. Lots of gym time. Obviously, I'm always kind of coming and going. So I go there every day aside from Saturday, Sunday. So I've been in since Monday. Literally the first thing I did as soon as I got home was the gym. So yeah, drove straight back, straight into pit fit, and I've just been kind of going about my day here while doing some Road America prep on the side.
And your first podium of the year, Worldwide Technology Raceway, as you said, your first over podium in your Indy NXT career as well. So kind of what are your initial reflections of Gateway? Kind of how pleased were you with the results and the weekend as a whole?
Yeah, I was really happy with how Gateway went. For me last year, ovals were a little bit difficult. I seemed to struggle on ovals in the past, which was honestly surprising for myself. I feel like I touched on this a little bit in the post-race press conference, but my initial transition to cars, following kind of my karting mechanics path, Aaron Nelliton, we did quite a bit of dirt racing, and I did that with the Torgersons and with some friends. So I did micro sprints, and I've done the Tulsa Shootout twice, and I have some experience on ovals that most of these drivers don't have. And so I really thought coming into Indy NXT that ovals would be somewhere where I would have a little bit of extra knowledge. But the dirt is a completely different world and really challenging, but there is some stuff that kind of translates. And so I really felt like I would have a bit of an easier time, but I really struggled the last couple of years, just wrapping my head around the setup. HMD, those guys do a great job, but they like to run a pretty loose car in an oval. And for me, that was hard. Even coming off of some of that dirt experience, I just didn't really like that. I wanted a bit more security. I wanted the confidence to bleed in. For me, it's fine if you get into the center and then you have a bit of a moment, but that initial bleed in, I really just wanted something more secure underneath. And so I really struggled with my engineer. And he did a great job in trying to give me the tools, but I just never could really figure it out in the end. So, this year with Andretti Global, that was really my first kind of thing on the ovals when we did some of the testing, was just how do I figure out what works for me from the car? And then how do I work with my engineer to figure out how I can make this work? And honestly, with these guys, the effects were immediate. Showed up to the Nashville test, was very quick, looked very sporty. And then even at the Gateway test before we showed up there, I was really fast. So, Myles Rowe and his engineer told me that they thought I was going to be the guy to beat coming into that weekend. So I thought that was a big confidence boost for me, but also a really nice compliment considering kind of how the ovals have gone the last couple of years. So I was really, really happy. And I love to see the progression from myself. And then, I think I surprised myself in the race a little bit with just how aggressive I was and how comfortable I was running the high line. So super, super happy with that performance and with the results. And I'm really grateful to the guys at Andretti Global and everybody that was behind me that weekend.
And obviously on ovals, being able to kind of trust the car and be comfortable in the car is kind of obviously a pretty big thing. So when you kind of contrast last year, maybe the year before as well, to this year, kind of how different do you feel in the car on the oval? I know this is obviously the first oval race that we've had, but you've had testing obviously as well. So how different do you actually feel in the car on ovals this year?
Much different. That was kind of the first thing that Andretti really worked on with me when we showed up to Nashville, was just confidence. It was something where immediately off the bat, they were like, look, let's just run as many laps as we can. And let's just build you up. We'll give you something underneath you that you can run with. And then, that way you can start to get comfortable in situations where previously you wouldn't be. And honestly, it's been pretty immediate, the results. So I've been, I think pleasantly surprised with myself and also with the team, and everything that we've done together has come together really well. So it was pretty immediate result, and something that I think I'm really proud of just with myself. And then also, kind of learning and figuring out more of what I want from the car in those situations. Because the ovals, like you say, it's a very unique thing. I think most people, they come in and they think, oh, it's really easy. You just turn left, but the confidence and what it takes to drive them is something very unique. It's different than the road courses. Road courses, when you have a lacking car balance, it's easier to drive through that as a driver. It's easier to use your tools, your footwork, whatever, to try and make things work for you. That's just something that can come more naturally. Whereas on the oval, when you have an imbalance in something that you don't like, it's very hard to deal with. It's not something you can naturally tune out like you can on the road courses. And so it becomes this really interesting back and forth with the engineer, where you have to really find that zone to stay in. And that's challenging. And when you pair that with the entry speed that you're traveling at, which you would never have on the road courses, you just don't have corners like that. And the G load, it's an incredibly difficult task. So, honestly, I'm really surprised with just how strong I was able to transition onto the ovals and with the Andretti crew. And it's been really exceptional to work with those guys.
And obviously you qualified really well this weekend. So kind of latching off what you were saying about ovals, it's a lot more than what people perceive as literally just turning left for a lap. So on a 2-lap qualifying run like that, just talk a bit about some of the challenges that you face in order to kind of really nail a lap or 2-lap run.
So I'll actually bring up something that Max Taylor, my teammate, was talking about, because this is something that we don't really touch on normally. The oval qualifying is a really interesting format. We do those 2-lap averages where it's just you out there on track, and that has a few unique properties. For one, you have perfectly clean air, which when we do oval testing, you'll almost never have, just because when there's so many cars on track, even 6 seconds back when you're creating these big holes, you're getting a little bit of a toe, you're getting a little bit of an effect. So while you might not be getting aero wash in the corner, you're still going to be getting a bit of draft. So it's the first time you're really entirely by yourself in perfectly clean air. But also all the pressure's on you, all the eyes are on you. It's a very unique scenario, which you don't normally have, which is that you're literally the only car on track. And so, every single camera's watching you, everybody's looking at you, and you can look at it in a few different ways. Either that's a lot of pressure and that leads to mistakes, or it's an opportunity to shine and show what you can do. But it's stressful because you have to build up speed quite quickly. And especially when you have, 2 hours after practice, or if you're going straight in and you didn't have all the practice you needed, whatever the case is, it's difficult. You have to go straight out, and it needs to be the 2 best laps of your weekend right away with very little time. Building the momentum and the speed is what you have to do immediately. And that warm-up lap is where you get that chance. But there's also some strategy there. You don't want to kill the tire too quickly. Luckily here with the Firestone tires, we don't have a ton of tire drag over the 2 laps, so you can bring it in quite quick and just keep going. But it's hard to build that momentum and that pace. And then, you're going out basically from a standstill and expected to be flat out right away. Gateway, I think, is its own unique challenge for quality because 1 and 2 is so different than 3 and 4. Most tracks that we go to, they're at least similar. Nashville being a tri-oval, you do have a bit of variance, but that really happens just on the entry and the exit. So the center of the corner drives essentially the same, whereas with Gateway, 1 and 2 drives completely differently from 3 and 4. So, turn-in point is different, throttle is different. 3 and 4 is super easy flat for us in the Indy NXT car, but 1 and 2 is where the challenge is, and that really comes from a nice progressive smooth lift all the way down to the apex. So there's a lot of complexity to oval qualifying, and that pressure of being the only car on track that Max and I kind of talked about in the trailer is something unique to ovals that I think just really spikes the challenge level.
Kind of on ovals, how valuable is gaining that experience? Because you've got kind of 3-4 years in the series now, and ultimately for a lot of these drivers, their first opportunity driving high-speed ovals. So kind of, do you think instincts such as when to make overtakes, when to use the high line, when to use the low line is something you just naturally comes to you, or is it something you generally build with experience, and how valuable does that become?
For sure, having experience is useful. I think a lot of the experience, though, comes from the people around you, right? If you have the right spotter, for me, Steven Simpson, who's been my driver coach since I started in cars, who has also been my spotter on the ovals since USF 2000, actually. So I know the voice really well. It's somebody I trust immensely, and he's super knowledgeable when it comes to this world. That kind of relationship is a big one because you need that spotter to be telling you not only what you can be doing, but the spotter at the same time should be looking around the track and seeing, okay, when I have a free second, it's useful for him to say, look, this guy's fast right now. Here's the line he's running. Here's what he's doing. And so I think that can be kind of a helpful situation. Last year, I did some spotting for USF 2000 when they came to the Freedom 75, and I actually thought that was really valuable as a driver. It wasn't the most fun to stand up there in the freezing cold, but I learned something because you get to see things from a different perspective and from the other side. And so, I think this being my 3rd full year, but my 4th year in the series, technically, I do have quite a bit of oval experience in this car. But really the people around you, and Andretti Global has a lot more experience as a team than I do. And so the people there kind of knowing the tracks, knowing typically how the races run, how they play out, where the rubber is, where the rubber gets laid down, how IndyCar affects the track, and then having a spotter that's, kind of perceptive and seeing things around you. I think those things make a bigger difference really than the experience does. But that also is partly just because the car can make such a big difference. And if you're a driver that knows what you want and can confidently suggest that, and then the car goes in that direction, and you have those people around you, you really start to see performance and results show up. So it's a big combination of things, and I think that definitely the experience helps, but I actually feel like the experience of the teams and the people around me is more valuable than what I've done.
And let's look at your race a little bit more in depth. Obviously, you started 4th, as you say, got to lead fairly early on, but the race is obviously pretty long, like it's longer than an IndyCar stint. So how do you kind of manage trying to get up front, get that track position, but also bearing in mind you have a long race to go, you have to look after tires, etc., etc.?
Yeah, that was the question mark for us coming into last weekend. I think we had the power reduction, right, which made things a little bit interesting. For us, at least, it was 6th gear all the way around, and that's different. Gateway last year we were downshifting twice, so you're going to 4th in 1 and 2. Whereas this year with the lower RPM, it was just 6th the whole way around because we all had to change gears. So that made things a little bit different. And then it was a question mark of, okay, well, now that we're traveling at a lower speed, are we still going to get the rear tire dag that we had last year? Because last year, that was the trouble for everybody in the race, was massive rear dag. So we were all thinking, okay, let's try and look after the rear tire and then see what it brings from there. And having those stints, like you talk about it being longer than IndyCar stint, is very strange. You're out there for so long circulating. I'm actually really dizzy after the oval races. I think there's some pictures of me sitting on the halo afterwards, but if I stand up immediately, I'll just fall over. So it is weird to be out there for that long without stopping, but you get used to it. And then, yeah, how do you prepare that tire or set the tire? I actually think my kind of downfall in that race was over protecting the rear, because that's the end that we expected, the dag. And so I ended up actually with a lot more front dag than I was anticipating at the end there, which made it hard. And I feel like if I had been a little bit less, let's say, meager with the right rear and the rear axle, I probably could have had a bit more left at the end and held on to second. DeTulio could just get the car back down the hill, and I couldn't do that. I was struggling with a lot of understeer towards the end, so I think I just burned the right front off of the thing trying to protect the rear. So that was something that was unexpected, and I've already talked about it with my engineer Len, and that's some stuff that for next year, even if I'm not in the car, the team will take note of that. So I think that'll kind of change how we race the track. Knowing now that you can kind of overprotect one end is difficult. I don't know really what I could have done to try and protect things or change things differently, and it's hard to look back on it and say that I could have for sure done this or that. So difficult race. It's tough to manage all that when you don't have a fresh set like IndyCar guys do, and you're out there for so long.
I just want to follow up on the dizziness bit that you said. So we've spoken to a lot of drivers kind of in Indy NXT who've said after their first oval test, they really get that. So do you remember your first time driving an oval and what you felt like on that occasion?
So I do. I think it was before Le Mans, probably in 23, because we were doing testing, and I had to do the oval test to basically be cleared to do a race weekend. So you have to do one test at least to clear yourself. I do remember that test. It was a weird feeling because you're not used to going that fast on an oval. Before that, I had just done USF 2000 and some dirt racing. So you're not, although the dirt car feels fast, it's not actually going that quickly. So you don't really get that feeling. And then driving around, you do 25 laps or you simulate a race distance and things are moving pretty quick. Your body gets so accustomed to the G load. And so accustomed to being thrown to one side, and all the blood kind of goes over that way. So then when you try and stand up, it's a little awkward for sure.
And whilst this was all going on in the race, you were obviously leading at one point. It looked pretty rosy for you to take the victory, but we all knew Myles would make a charge from the back. But were you expecting him to make that much of a charge, and kind of how aware were you that he was getting through the field that quickly, and was ultimately anything being able to done to stop his charge?
So for sure, I wasn't expecting their car and him to have that much pace. I think none of us were. If you look back at the press conference, we're all quite surprised. Everybody knows he's fast. Myles, he does a great job on the ovals. And Abel always seems to have a really strong car on the ovals as well. So that combination has been pretty disastardly for everyone else. But we all knew he'd be quick. I think when I got to the lead, there was a point where I was like, man, I've got really strong pace here. I'm pulling away from Lockie. And really, I just wanted it to stay green because I was really strong in traffic in that first couple of stints when we first found it. And so I was really hoping that race would just stay green because I really wanted a clean run to the finish. And I felt like I was really strong in the lap traffic. So the yellows definitely did not help me. I also think that getting the tire going on the restarts, I was able to keep pressure in the tires, and Len was updating me on that. And so that was fine. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't really switch the front on after the yellows. So that was a challenge. And then seeing him come through the field like that, there was one point, I think Steven Summerrader was like, Myles is P2 now. And I was just like, wow, okay. So that's not very helpful for me. I think one of the only ones that could really manage to stay with him. And that's what Steven told me on the radio as well, is after he got around me, I did manage to keep pace with him. And so I really think that if that race had kept going, I probably would have been able to stay there, and lap traffic might have played a factor. So I was really just hoping for the yellows to stay out, because with the pace that they had in clean air, and coming from the back like that, I needed something else to help me close that gap back up, because I just couldn't manage that pace. So I think with a green race, maybe things would have looked a little bit different and probably could have made it a bit closer. But yeah, they had such incredible pace, and to try and, we're looking at everything we can right now as a team to see what we can do to maybe match that for the next one. So, these guys, I'm confident with everybody at Andretti. I know that my engineer Len and my mechanics and everybody are going to find a way. So we'll show up to the next one swinging as well. But yeah, they had amazing pace, and I think maybe without the yellows, I could have done without that to try and get that win. But I wanted it really bad. I think I raced him the hardest out of everybody. So. I did everything I could, but just couldn't match his pace in the end.
And talking of kind of racing hard, we saw some pretty good side-by-side with Max at that kind of late stage of the race, with D'Atulio as well, ultimately, as he took your second place. But just talk about kind of those side-by-side exchanges, kind of what you enjoy about that sort of racing on ovals, and I guess in those specific cases as well late in the race.
So oval racing is super unique. I think that trying to describe it to somebody that's only done road courses is very difficult. Running side by side like that takes so much trust, but also respect. We saw it last year, where when you're not quite as trusting or respectful, it can result in some big crashes, which we've seen over the years. And that's not necessarily drivers just not caring. It's more, you have a tiny lapse in judgment. You let the car understeer up a little bit too far when someone's on your outside, and then you both end up in the fence, or the guy on the outside ends up the fence. So it takes a lot of trust and a lot of respect to do it. It's one of those things where if you don't trust your competitors, you're just not going to be able to do it. If you're coming up to a car and you're like, I don't trust this guy, you're not going to go around the outside because you're intimidated. So it is hard. You're running. We probably enter turn one at 175. And when you're doing that side by side, inches from each other, it does take a lot of commitment and a lot of respect and trust. I do think that when you have that though, and you end up like we had in St. Louis last week, you have this amazing feeling of like, wow, this is awesome racing. It's so much fun. It almost reminds me of like rental karting with friends, where there's so much back and forth, everything's going on, it's happening fast, the racing's close, you're not making contact, but it feels exhilarating. It's really close, really respectful, and you get a big rush from it. But it's hard to do that. You have to really trust the people around you, really respect them, and thankfully we had that, and it produced some amazing racing. So yeah, honestly, massive respect to everybody that turned out and was putting on a show, because I think from all of us that was really fun to watch, and for the fans, but for me also as a driver, that was really fun to compete in. So hopefully all the rest of the short ovals we can be as respectful and as clean as that, and be able to race the same way. But yeah, it takes a lot. It's hard. I think we all touched on it in the press conference, but yeah, you can't have an ego or a lack of respect, because it just won't work on the oval. You have to be trusting and a bit compassionate in the end, and it's difficult.
I'm interested about that trust element, because IndyCar drivers speak about it quite a lot, but they've been racing guys for 10, 15 years on ovals, whilst you guys have done maybe one or two races, and maybe that's it for most of the guys. So how do you kind of build trust with drivers you've never raced on oval before? Is it a lot of instinct work? Is it like, how does that work when you're kind of starting off at that level?
So it's interesting. I think everybody in motorsports, especially in kind of the American paddocks, has a mutual respect for each other. One of my big advantages as a driver is I did the endurance side, coming through and very early on as well. And, Alex Lynn was a big influence on me, along with everyone I drove with, Oliver Jarvis and Tom Blomqvist, Guido van der Garde, all these guys. But one thing that Alex said that really stuck with me is I remember, doing testing in Europe, especially in junior formulas. My feeling was like, wow, this is really cutthroat. Like, people here kind of feel like they hate me, and I haven't even spoken to them yet, right? But that's just the way it is. Everybody has a knife to everyone's back, but in America, that was confusing for me, because here it's the complete opposite. People are very friendly, very outgoing. Drivers are very complimentary, which is kind of unique and rare. And so I asked Alex Lynn about that, because the sports car paddock in Europe is more like America. It's very friendly, very open. When I first showed up there, Antonio Felix da Costa, Rene Rast, some of those guys just straight up walked into the garage to come say hi, just introduce themselves and meet me. And that's a really cool thing, right, for me, but also just as a respect and a paddock thing. And so I asked Alex, and I was like, what's the difference there? Why is that? And his response was because, he was saying that everybody that's in the endurance paddock, was somebody that at one point in their career, for the most part, was trying to get to Formula One or IndyCar. And his theory was, everybody here at one point was told they're not good enough. And so it humbles you a bit, and it makes you more respectful of the people around you and what you've been given. And I think America, we do a pretty good job in karting of bringing kids up and having that understanding already and immediately. Because at the end of the day, we're all racing for the same thing, right? And I think that there's a big difference between confidence and arrogance. You can be quietly confident, but you don't have to be outwardly arrogant. And I think America, we are very blessed with drivers that are that way, and it makes for a really great paddock, a very supportive paddock and complimentary one. So it's something a little bit different. But when you're first starting, getting into that, and you have no relationship with somebody, building that relationship can be a challenge. And so I think that it's more a matter of talking to the guy, getting to know him a little bit, and then we all understand each other's backgrounds, but. Also, for the majority of us, it's not our first time racing against each other, even if we're coming together for the first time in Indy NXT. DeTulio is a good example. I grew up karting against Ale. So, there's already a bit of a relationship there, and we've never competed in Indy NXT together before, but from the very start, we've always kind of been there. And America is a very tight-knit, very small community for motorsports. And so once you're kind of there, you're there. Whether it's in endurance or Indy NXT, IndyCar, whatever the series is, wherever you're coming from, we all kind of started in karting. And so everybody has a bit of a connection at some stage or the other. But yeah, it's more about, getting to know people, being friendly, having fun. All of us are hanging out together when we have free time and we're not at the track. So we all live here in Indy. So we're that's one of the things that makes it interesting, right? We're athletes, we're competitors, but off the track we're friends and going and hanging out just like any normal person would. So it's a tight knit and a small community, and I think that just helps to really further build that trust.
And obviously you made this change of teams this year. So I guess just looking back before Gateway, it hadn't been the easiest start to the year necessarily. So just talk a bit about kind of how your season has gone so far, maybe where some of the results were lacking, like why that might have been, and yeah, just generally kind of your assessment of pre-Gateway.
Yeah, definitely rocky start. I think coming into St. Pete, street circuits last year weren't necessarily my bread and butter. I had a great race at St. Pete, drove through the field after we had that issue in qualifying, and but all in all, I don't think street circuits have been the best for me, especially in qualifying trim. I think bumpy layouts, I'm somebody that really likes a secure entry, but street circuits don't really ever give you that feeling because the car's always bouncing around and in the air. So, yeah, it's been really up and down for us. I think St. Pete was pretty decent, all things considered. Made a few mistakes, probably could have been further up, but, finished decently strong. Barber was a little bit of a qualifying error for, honestly, both Lockie and I. We kind of stepped over each other in qualifying there, and that hurt both of us. So that one, once you're in the mid-pack, qualifying, this is a qualifying series. It's hard to overtake, it's hard to follow close. So qualifying is the big one. You need to be up there. You need to be in the first couple of rows to really have things work out for you. And once you're in the mid-pack, you're at the mercy of those around you, right? And we've got good drivers in the series, but racing happens. And Barber, unfortunately for me, I was kind of the victim of that. So, Seb getting into Correa, which then into me in Barber race 1, and then race 2 getting shuffled out on the curb and bottoming out. So it's been really up and down. Arlington was just me. I just really struggled there. I couldn't find what I wanted or needed from the car. And that was just really hard. I feel like that whole weekend I also had really bad allergies, so it was a whole mess of things. My engineer Len got taken to hospital 30 minutes before the race started. It was just a disaster of a weekend. So that one was the throwaway for me that I feel like was mainly driving, and then the other ones had a bit of bad luck, a bit of unfortunate circumstance. I think Indy, the pace and qualifying was really strong. Race one in the wet, if that race had stayed dry, for sure it would have been Andretti 1-2-3. We were super strong and running away with it. Lockie, Max, and I, and then with the wets, I just chewed up the fronts and went backwards from there. So that one was hard. Race two, Max and I basically crashing each other in turn one was not helpful. We got talked about to that one in the truck. So, I think it's been a bit of unfortunate circumstance. Been the victim a couple times, also done it to myself. So it's just been so up and down, and I feel like we really needed a bit of a confidence boost and just a clean, solid weekend, which I'm thankful that we got in St. Louis here finally. So, hopefully momentum will turn around. I mean, at Barber, I was helping the mechanics clean the car after race one because I wasn't going to do the debrief. I did, what was that, 3 corners or something into the race. So Len just laughed when I asked if he wanted a debrief. He's like, no, he didn't even drive. So I was helping the mechanics clean the car, and Steven and the mechanics are all just standing there laughing. Like, at some point our luck will turn around, and it didn't seem to very quickly, but it came back around for us at St. Louis, and I feel like it was nice to finally get the opportunity to show what I can do and put my name back on the map.
And you mentioned yourself, this is obviously year 4, third full season, but it's year 4 in Indy NXT for you. So it's a funny one because you are kind of still on the younger side, like you're comparable with a lot of the drivers that are rookies even. So do you feel any kind of added expectation knowing that you are kind of so many years into your Indy NXT career? Just talk a bit about kind of how that works, because obviously, like, you sometimes see in these junior series when a driver's in their 3rd year, people think, well, it's kind of boom or bust now, but you obviously had quite a different path coming in so young.
Yeah, it's been difficult, right? I think the challenge that I had was coming from sports cars, right? I did 2 years fully in the World Endurance Championship in IMSA. I did no Formula car on the side, and I think that the LMP2 car is a great car when you're transitioning. If you're a Formula car driver and you want to do some endurance, the LMP2 car, it transitions back and forth really well. But when you get fully integrated into that world and all you're driving is the LMP2 car, you forget some of the quirks and I guess unique things to Formula car racing. The first one for me that was hard to get back into the swing of was qualifying. I did 2 years of basically never qualifying a car. And I had only had 2 years of USF 2000 and then came straight into Indy NXT in 23. And this is now the first time I'm qualifying a car in 2 years. And it's, basically 3 steps ahead of anything I've done previously. So that was challenging, but also it was hard for us to justify going back and doing USF Pro, which at the time was Indy Pro 2000, because we're like, this is a weird in-between thing, right? Like, it just put me in a very weird spot. I think the endurance was super valuable. I learned a lot. The other problem with it, though, is that all the things I learned, tire saving, fuel management, that stuff doesn't help me here. It's only going to help me in IndyCar. But you got to get there to find some use in that. So I have a lot of knowledge in that area. I've done live pit stops and fuel saving and tire management and things that will really be helpful to get a running start in IndyCar, but they don't help here. And you combine not qualifying with that, it just made for a really rough start and a really, rough proving ground. It was basically throwing myself to the wolves and kind of expecting it to work out well, as going straight from USF 2000 to, Indy NXT. And I'm somebody that is very methodical. I feel like I learn quite slowly and methodically. So getting thrown straight in there and not qualifying in 2 years, and then now I've got all this pressure on me again, and there's lots of things happening, was just a lot for me as a driver, especially so young. And so I think it was a weird transition and a weird kind of stretch in my career. I wouldn't trade how I've been brought up with for anything. I loved endurance racing and would love to go do it again. And I think I learned some really valuable skills there that will translate to IndyCar. And so if I can get there, that's going to be very helpful. But right now it's just about getting there. And it's been really about building myself back up, getting in that Formula car mentality. And, like I touched on, there's just some things that you just don't normally think about. I went from a car with power steering, where I'm in the car for, 2.5 hours before I get out. And, You don't really have to turn the wheel very much because the thing turns by itself. You just turn the wheel, probably this much, and you're in the corner. And then you go to the Indy NXT car, no power steering. Because of that, you have to really wind in radius and lock. And just a weird combination, a very interesting switch. And so trying to flip my brain when I was so young, it was just hard. It took me a while to really get used to the car and to start finding my footing. So yeah, it's been a challenge. For me, this feels really more like year 2 fully, rather than year 4, because I feel like 2025 was where I really started to, okay, now I understand what's happening, where I'm going, and et cetera. So yeah, it's definitely difficult. I do think that being so young still, though, I've got a long way to go. But there's lots of fast guys coming in that are even younger now. So, who knows? I think next year at this point, we might have some 14-year-olds coming or something like that.
So you go to Road America in a couple of weeks, obviously a double header weekend. So kind of just give us your brief kind of expectations for the weekend. Are you a fan of the double header weekends? Are you more of a single header weekend guy? What's kind of the mood there?
I think there's positives and negatives, right? I actually like the current format, though. I think the only exception to this is Portland, but I think it's very smart. You show up to the street circuit and you give us 2 practices with the caveat of there'll only be 1 race. But street circuit's a little bit more difficult. Everything's tight, twisty, so it's nice to have that extra kind of sightseeing, especially if you have a crash in practice 1, for example, right? You're going to want more time. Whereas road courses, it's a bit safer. You can kind of go off and get away with it, although it depends on the road course. If you look at Barber, that one's not a whole lot of room for error. So depends on the road course, but generally a bit safer. You get 1 practice, but you get 2 races. So you get a little bit of an extra showing on that front, ability to score more points, have a better weekend, etc. So I think there are positives and negatives. I like the current format. I think it's smart to have the 2 practices on the street circuits, but then having the 2 races with 1 practice on road courses. I love Road America. It's a track that I've run strong at in the past. Last year, finished 4th, and I told Lockie that I had a punching bag with his face on it at my house for several weeks afterwards. But yeah, it was a heartbreaker for me last year, but I still had strong pace. I think I qualified 3rd and ran there for the whole race aside from the last lap. So that was frustrating, but I definitely love the track. Historically, it's been kind to me, and I've run well there. So I love it, even though I think, in 2020 I had brake failure there, which is the biggest crash of my life. So I've had highs and lows there. For sure, I love the track. I like the current format. I think it works really well. Portland, I wish was a doubleheader, not just because it's my home race, but also just I would love to have another go there. So that's the one weird exception to that rule. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to it. I know we're going to have a strong car. The Andretti Global guys, everybody on this 29 crew has done a phenomenal job. And I feel like it was nice to finally show what they could do and then what I can do in St. Louis. So yeah, everybody's excited for Road America. I know my car crew's pumped. I think Blake, one of my mechanics, that was only his 2nd ever podium in the series. So we gotta try and bring him some more hardware.
I know racing drivers are always busy, but you got a week off. Any plans? World Cup starts tomorrow. You're going to be following along with what's going on there, being in America, or you're not a soccer guy?
I played soccer growing up.
Oh, nice.
I played for my middle school. So yeah, it was one of those things where I feel like I'm just such a competitive person. I'm always doing something competitive. I think a lot of us as well here, we're playing pickleball or paddle, or we're always trying to find a way to be competitive and stay competitive. Even at the gym, everything is scored and we have times on the wall. And so yeah, I'm quite competitive. I played soccer growing up, and I've been to a Chelsea match before in Dubai. So I have watched some professional soccer. I feel like sports for me, I have such a hard time watching them if I'm not actually there or playing it. Aside from motorsports I can watch all day long. But yeah, I might get some hate for saying that. But basketball, hockey, a lot of these sports, it's fun to watch. But I just at some point I'm like, I'd rather play it. I want to go play it. So I probably will have it on in the background for sure while I'm doing stuff. Provided there's no racing going on at the same time, but Le Mans is also this weekend, so that probably takes priority for me. I would love to be back there. I feel like I have unfinished business at not only the Rolex but also Le Mans. So yeah, I'll probably be watching that and seeing how the guys are getting on in France.
You're going to go for the full 24 hours? You're going to take strategical sleep breaks? What's the balance of watching it but getting your rest?
Yeah, I mean, Daytona, I had it on I think I almost stayed up for the whole thing in January. I had to turn it on the TV at, what was it, 3:20 in the afternoon here, and then was just, while making dinner or whatever, I just had the thing on. I had it on all night. So I probably only got about 3 hours of sleep, because anytime the announcers said something, I ran out there to go see what was happening. So I'm sure I'll be doing the same thing again. Probably won't get much sleep, but that's part of it. I'll at least be having some fun, and I'll be wishing I was there, but that's life.
Awesome, Josh. I really appreciate your time. Congratulations once again on the result of Gateway. We'll hope to speak to you again at some point soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks to Josh for his time. We're sorry that went on really, really long, but we had to keep Josh on for his insight. It was some of the most awesome we've had so far. Let's hope we have him on later this year, because he's got plenty to say. I mean, we could have gone on for ages and ages and ages, but just kept on talking with some really cool insight there. So I hope you enjoyed that. But as we always do, let's segue into kind of the weekend recap. And as we always do, we're going to start off with qualifying. And as you've already gathered, it was a bit of a dramatic qualifying session at Gateway, as two of the favourites hit trouble, which meant they both started at the back. As you've heard from Myles, he had a slight communication issue, which meant he ran for that extra lap and therefore was disqualified and sent to the back. He wasn't the only one to face issues, as championship leader Enzo Fittipaldi suffered a ruptured fuel cell, which stopped him from having his guaranteed run in qualifying and forcing him to the back of the grid alongside Rowe. The driver to take advantage of those two's troubles was Lockie Hughes, who secured his third career pole and the first of his Indy NXT season. Much to his amusement, he didn't know Fittipaldi wasn't running, so on the broadcast he was very confused at the fact he had taken pole. But for Lockie's sake, luckily he did take pole, as he qualified faster to a 162.578 mile an hour lap time. Rowe would have qualified in second place, but due to his penalties, we said he was sent to the back. So Alessandro Tuttulio inherited P2 for his seventh front row in a start, proving that he's not doing it at just the road and street courses, he's doing it on the overs as well, as he once again impressed in qualifying. Andretti proved particularly strong, as Max Taylor was in third, followed by Josh Pierson in fourth. Two championship contenders followed, with Nikita Johnson in fifth and Timothy Kaharchik in sixth. Chip Ganassi Racing's Niels Coulomb was in seventh, with HMD's Jack Beaton in eighth. Juden Sundaramurvi, who replaced Nicholas Statia for this weekend at Cusick Morgan Motorsports after a year and a half out of the series, he qualified in ninth in a pretty decent comeback return, and Seb Murray rounded out the Andretti's in 10th place. Archie, let's go on to what happened during the race.
Yes, and much of the drama from qualifying continued right to the start of the race, because as engines were fired, Enzo Fittipaldi was rolled off pit lane, and it looked for all the world like he was going to miss the start. He did kind of miss the start, but the team managed to fix the further mechanical issue that he suffered from in order to allow him to rejoin the race at the very back of the lead lap. So the field had taken the green flag, but he just got out ahead of them, and thankfully for him, cautions brought him back into contention, and actually he recovered to a very respectable 13th place. There was also an issue before the race for Matteo Nannini. His Cape ECR machine also had an issue. I believe it was a leak, it was reported, and he fell 7 laps down, so that was his day ended pretty much before it had started. In terms of the actual race, Hughes managed to keep hold of the lead at the start. Pierson jumped up to second place after a pretty strong start, and it had been a clean start until lap 5, when Alexander Kariba found the wall in turn 4, running up high as Rowe passed him on the inside at the very start of his charge through the field. Positions 1 and 2 were held on the restart, although Tuttulio started dropping back, so Taylor jumped up ahead of him, as did Nikita Johnson as well, in terms of two of our title protagonists. At the very front of the field, it was not an easy ride for Hughes, though, and within 15 laps of the restart, after a couple of laps spent very enthrallingly side by side, Pierson managed to get around him and take the race lead off his pole-sitting teammate. All the while, the Rowe show was unfolding behind. By lap 20, he was already into the top 10. By lap 23, he'd made a pass per lap to be 7th, and before even reaching the halfway point of the race, he had climbed above Taylor and onto the podium. The lead fight eventually reached some pretty heavy traffic on lap 41, and at that point, Rowe capitalised to get past Hughes, and Pierson had briefly pulled away. But by lap 47, before even the 2/3 mark of the race, Rowe put on an inside move to take the race lead. 2 cautions followed to halt what could have been a proper charge away from the field from Rowe, the first of which was for Debrief, and the second of which for pretty dramatic crash, as Salvador de Alba, who has been handed a 6th place starting penalty for race 1 at Road America for the incident, washed up high into Sundaramurthy, who was pushed into the wall and ended up doing quite a spectacular wheelie. De Alba ended up hitting the inside wall. Both drivers, though, were okay, thankfully. The second of the restarts was the best for Pierson, although Rowe still managed to fend him off with his well-managed tyres, and street clear to possibly the series' greatest ever win. Further behind, Pierson found himself passed by D'Autulio, and Niels Coughlan for Ganassi made his way up to fourth for their best result since returning to the series last year. Taylor, who had been fighting Pierson for second place at one point on the late restarts, dropped to fifth in the end. Hughes, the pole sitter, dropping to sixth, which will have been disappointing for him and possibly compounded what has obviously been a tough start to his year. Johnson came home sixth. Max Garcia, the rookie for Able Motorsports, was eighth. Timet Kaharchik in his first oval race for HMD was ninth, and the top 10 was rounded out by Jordan Missick, also for Able, as they showed their strength on ovals. We had 4 retirements for the race: Sundra Modi and Dialba, obviously from the late crash, Kariba from his early crash, and Bryce Aaron had a mechanical failure for Ganassi inside only the first 5 laps, so tough day for him.
So let's pivot to the championship standings. Coming into the weekend, it was already very close between the top 3 in the championship, just 8 points separating them. Well, that's narrowed even further to just 5 points at the top of the standings. However, Nikita Johnson retakes championship lead after Fittipaldi's difficult weekend. He holds a 2-point gap over the Brazilian, with Timet Kaharchik a further 3 points behind. The rookies really showing up this year, with the top 3 in the standings all being series rookies. Taylor's kind of a little bit in no man's land at fourth. He's 22 behind Kaharchik, but still very much in the championship picture, still only 27 points behind Johnson, the lead of the standings. Then between 5th and 7th, we have another bubble with Rowe, D'Autulio and Hughes separated by 6 points. Rowe, kind of at the top of those 3, is still 73 points off the championship lead. Hughes at the bottom there, 79. The gap between 1st and 7th has decreased though from 107 points to just 79, so kind of a big swing there this weekend. Rowe, D'Autulio and Hughes, we said, are slightly behind, but with a good run of races they could certainly filter themselves back into the championship picture. Then we have a little gap back to JM Correa in 8th place on 172. He's 113 points on the championship lead. He's a further 6 points ahead of Murray in 9th in the standings, and Missick, I feel like Missick's been the top 10 this entire year in 10th, and he's another 6 points behind Sebastian Murray. We're also at the halfway point now of the Indy next season. 8 races done, there are still 9 to go, so you can't have a mathematical halfway. We're effectively halfway, and with the fact there are 3 double-header weekends at the end of the season, we have had the same amount of race weekends thus far. So that starts with Road America, which will be 1 week after this episode goes out. Sorry it's a little bit late. We obviously had to try and get Myles on. He was pretty busy this week, but I'm sure you enjoyed that episode. So Road America, as we said, is a week's time. That's going to be a double-header, and 2 weeks after head to mid-Ohio. So it's a weekend which could have really potentially changed the picture of the championship. As we said, it's still very close right at the top, so these races all make a huge difference.
It's shaping up nicely. I mean, we've got a proper fight at the top of the championship, which we can't necessarily have said for the last couple of years, with Foster running away with it and Hauger running away with it last year. So to have the top 3 split by 5 points, top 4 split by 27 at the halfway mark is pretty enticing going down the stretch.
But we'll leave it there for Gateway. As we said, a really good episode. We hope you enjoyed. Josh and Myles here. I'm good streak of having really good insight in this series, and long may that continue. But for this time, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.